There were 11 of us who went up the spine that first night, and I want to set the number down plainly because the number is the whole of what she did. Rourke, myself the correspondent, who had come to write 400 words about leeches, and 9 soldiers, 3 of them carried, one of them the captain who had told her to watch how the grown-ups did it. 11 living people on the wrong side of a river 40 miles from home, with the men who had gutted our company between us and the road. I had seen smaller groups in better country come apart and die. I had written about it. I expected that first night to be writing about it again if I lived to write anything. She did not let us die. That is the simplest way to say it and the truest, and it took her 3 days and 40 miles and a discipline so total and so quiet that I did not fully understand what I had witnessed until it was over and I had time to be afraid in retrospect of all the ways it should have ended and didn't. The first thing she did before we had gone a mile was take our noise away from us, not with a speech. She moved down the little column in the dark and she put her hands on our gear, every man's, mine included, and she found everything that could rattle or clink or catch, a loose sling swivel, a half-empty canteen, the dog tags a frightened boy had not taped, and she fixed it fast with hands that knew exactly where to look. She showed 2 men how to walk so the jungle did not announce them, heels soft, weight rolling forward, eyes up and not down at their own feet. The ground will tell you where it is, she whispered. You don't have to watch it, watch the dark ahead and let your feet read the ground. I did not believe her until I tried it and found that it was true, that the body knows things the eyes get in the way of, and I understood that this was what she taught at the schoolhouse, this exact thing, and that the captain had called it chalk. She moved us at night and she lay us up by day, and the laying up was its own kind of mastery. She did not pick the comfortable places. She picked the wrong places, the steep tangled draws full of thorn where no sane man would choose to spend a day because the enemy thought the same and never came there. She set us in a tight wheel with the wounded in the center and our weapons facing out, and she taught us, by whispered word and by the flat pressure of her hand on a shoulder, to be still in a way that soldiers are not naturally still, to let the insects walk on us, to let the cramp build and not shift, to let a man's whole world shrink to the patch of green in front of his weapon and the next slow breath. The first day of patrol passed below us, close 20 men in single file along a trail we had crossed in the night, and I lay in the thorn with my heart going like a fist on a door and watched her 3 feet away, watch them. She did not move. She did not breathe wrong. She had one hand flat on the back of the youngest soldier among us, a boy of perhaps 19 who was shaking, and the hand never lifted and never pressed. It just stayed steady as a stone and the boy stopped shaking. The patrol passed. They never knew we were there. When they had gone, she let one long breath out through her nose, and that was all, and she gave us water from a bladder she had filled at a seep none of us had even seen, and we went on. The water was the thing I think about most. A man in that heat carrying fear and a wounded friend needs water the way a fire needs air, and there was none to drink. The river was poisoned by the enemy below us, and the high ground had only what the rain left and what hid in the green if you knew where it hid. She knew where it hid. She read the land the way I read a face. She found water in the crooks of certain broad leaves and in the seeps at the base of certain rocks, and once, on the second day, in a stand of bamboo, where she cut a green section with her knife and tipped a cup of clean, cool water out of it into a canteen cup, and the 19-year-old looked at her as if she had pulled it from the air. She treated all of it, every drop, with the small tablets from her own kit and a patience that would not be hurried, and she made us drink on a schedule whether we wanted to or not, and not one of us went down from the heat in 3 days in country that kills men from the heat in 1. The captain had told her the men were carrying 80 pounds in this heat, as if the heat were her foolish notion. The heat was the patient thing waiting to kill us, and she beat it with leaves and rocks and tablets and a schedule, and she never once said, "I told you so." She never once said it. That is what I most want you to understand about her, because I am a man who has built a life out of words, and I know how badly a person wants, in the moment of being proven right at terrible cost, to say the words. She had warned them about the riverbend. 130 men were dead because the warning was waved away with a joke about grown-ups. She had every right that a human being can have to bitterness, and she carried none of it that I ever saw. She did not punish the survivors with her correctness. She did not even seem to be thinking about it. She was thinking about water and noise and the patrols and the captain's wound and the next 40 hours, and the past was a closed door she did not waste herself looking at, and I think now that this was not coldness but the highest kind of discipline I have ever seen in any human being, the discipline to spend nothing on what could not be changed and everything on what could. I learned who she was on the second night from the oldest of the 9 soldiers, a lean weathered staff sergeant named Calloway who had said almost nothing the whole way and who settled in beside me at a halt while she was forward checking the route. He had heard her call sign on the net during the ambush, he said, and it had stopped his heart for a different reason than the bullets had. "Driftwood," he whispered. "You don't know that name, I know that name. Everybody in the recon community knows that name." And he told me low in pieces, watching her dark shape where she crouched ahead of us against the lighter dark of the sky. There had been an operation years before in country worse than this, mountains and snow, and a whole hostile battalion pushed up into a valley to close a trap on a small reconnaissance team. The team had been broken up in the first hour. Most had not come out. One had one alone with a wounded man she would not leave, and she had walked that wounded man out of the closing trap and across 60 miles and 6 days of a country crawling with the men hunting her, evading a battalion, living off the land, carrying him the last day when he could no longer walk, and she had brought him home alive. They had given her things for it that they do not give many people and that she did not. Calloway said, ever wear or speak of. And then when she had done enough of that for 2 lifetimes, she had asked to be sent to the schoolhouse on the coast, to teach young soldiers the things that had kept her alive, because she had decided, Calloway said, that she was tired of being the one who came home from places where everyone else didn't, and that maybe if she taught enough of them well enough, fewer of them would die. That's who told the captain to take the east bench, Calloway whispered. That's who he told to stay at the back, the grown-ups. And he laughed once, silently, a terrible, bitter, soundless laugh, and then he did not laugh anymore. I lay in the dark with that, and I thought of my notebook gone in the brown river, and the 400 words I had been going to write, and the easy story I had believed before we had gone a mile, and I was more ashamed than I have ever been in my life before or since. The captain heard some of it too, I think, or knew it already in the way that wounded men come to know things in the long dark hours when there is nothing to do but bleed slowly and think. His wound went bad on the second day, the way thigh wounds do, hot and swollen, and he ran a fever, and there was a stretch on the second night when the litter we had made of 2 poles and a poncho seemed to be carrying a dying man. She stopped us. She would not be hurried even then. She knelt over him and opened the dressing and did what could be done with what she had, which was more than I would have thought possible, and she got fluid into him drop by drop through the long bad hours, and somewhere before dawn the fever broke and he came back to us. I was near him when his eyes cleared. He looked up and found her face above him in the gray, and he tried to speak, and she put 2 fingers against his lips, gently, the way you quiet a child. I know, sir, she said, you don't have to. I have to, he said, his voice was wrecked. I have to say it, I was wrong, about the bend, about you, I made a joke and 130 of my men are. Captain, she said it quietly, and it stopped him as surely as a hand. Listen to me, because I am only going to say this once and then we are going to get up and walk. What happened at the bend is going to live in you the rest of your life. I know that because I have rooms in me like that, more than you'd think to look at me. You don't get to put them down, but you do get to decide what you carry them toward. Right now you carry them toward that river crossing tonight, and toward Cantor, and toward writing the letters yourself, everyone, in your own hand. That's the work. The being sorry is not the work. The work is the letters and the next men you don't get killed. Can you stand? He could not yet, but the men carried him, and he stopped apologizing and started in his thready voice, doing the only useful thing a carried officer can do, which was to encourage the boys carrying him and to take his turn at the watch with his eyes when they halted. And I watched the captain become, over those last 2 days, a different and a better officer than the bright, certain one who had walked into the valley. And the thing that made him was being carried out of his own catastrophe by the woman he had mocked, and being told by her that the way to honor the dead was to do the work. The river crossing on the 3rd night was the worst of it and the finest thing I ever saw her do. We had to get back across the tallow to reach the friendly side, and she would not take us back to the low fords which the enemy watched, but had angled us north for 2 days to a place she had marked on her grease pencil map, a bend where the river spread wide and shallow over gravel and the banks fell back. Wide and shallow but not slow, the rains had it running hard and cold, and a wounded man in it would go down and not come up, and there was a strip of open gravel on the far side that we would have to cross in the dark with no cover at all, and she sat us in the brush above it for an hour just watching before she would let one boot touch the water. She was reading the far bank for the enemy the way she had read the leaves for water. When she was satisfied, she went into the river herself first, alone with a coil of line off a recovered rucksack tied around her waist, and she crossed that hard cold water in the dark at the head of the current and tied the line off on the far side to snag, and then she came back and crossed it again, and on her word we went over 1 and 2 at a time, hand over hand on her line, the wounded lashed to the strongest swimmers, and the cold dragging at us and the line humming with the strain. And she stood waist deep in the middle of the river the whole time, every one of us with one hand on the line and the other ready, putting her body between each man and the current, and not one of us went down. Not one. She had told us in the thicket that she intended to walk all 11 home, and she had said it as a plan and not a hope. And on the gravel of the far bank in the cold dark of the 3rd night, I counted 11 of us, soaked and shaking and alive, and I understood that I had watched a person keep a promise that no reasonable person should have been able to keep. We came onto the friendly lines just after first light, in the rain that had not stopped since the spine. There was a forward element pushed up the road toward us, a relief column the brigade had sent the moment the ambush was reported, men who had spent 3 days certain they were going to find a company's worth of dead, and who had found instead nothing, no bodies, no survivors, no trace, because she had taken us up into the country where the enemy did not look, and the friendlies could not follow. A young lieutenant from the relief saw us first, and his radio call brought the rest of them running. And they came up the muddy road in the gray rain and stopped, all of them, when they saw what was coming down out of the green. 11 scarecrows, 3 on litters, led by a woman with a soaked grease pencil map still folded against her chest, walking the last 100 meters as steady as she had walked the first. There was a colonel with the relief. I did not know him. He came forward through his stopped men, and I watched him take in the litters and the survivors and the woman at their head, and I watched him stop. He looked at her for a long moment in the rain, and something moved across his hard old face, recognition, the same thing I had seen move across Calloway's, and he came to halt 3 paces from her, and he did the thing that I will carry to my own grave. He took off his cover. He took off his cover in the rain, bareheaded, water running down his gray face, and he came to attention, and he saluted her, a master sergeant, a colonel saluting a master sergeant, which is not a thing that is done, and he held it. "Driftwood," he said. "Not a question. I read your file the week I took command. I didn't think I'd ever get to do this." And he held the salute until she returned it. And then they all did it. The relief column, the lieutenant, the running men who had skidded to a stop in the mud, one by one, raggedly, then all at once, they came off their covers in the pouring rain and stood bareheaded, and the surviving soldiers from our own broken company stood bareheaded among them. And on his litter, Captain Bram Doyle, who could not stand, struggled up onto one elbow with his ruined leg and got his hand to his brow and held it there, shaking, his face running with rain or with something else. The captain who 3 days and 130 lives ago had told her to watch how the grown-ups did it, saluting her now from the litter she had carried him out of hell upon. And I stood there with no notebook and no cover of my own and the rain coming down, and I wept openly, a man of 50-some years who had thought he was past such things, and I was not ashamed of it, because it was